I've been playing my fair share for Dragon's Dogma back recently to prepare myself to feel my character, see what is it that I want to do first whenever Dragon's Dogma 2 launches. And there's one thing that I have realized based on what we have seen, based on a couple of things that Itsuno has said, and one of my favorite characters. Like always, I'm just the basic kind of dude. I like my knights, I like sword and board. One of my main characters in Dragon's Dogma, original Dragon's Dogma, it was the warrior. The thing is that the warrior is a little bit underpowered, and when I mean underpowered, it's not necessarily because of how much damage he can dish out. As a matter of fact, if you plan your attacks, if you do like kind of stuff properly, adequately, the warrior is one of the characters that deals the most damage possible to a single target enemy. But when you compare him to something like the assassin, that can also do the very same thing, but he also can do it with a bow, for example, or, for example, a mage or a sorcerer that can have like big chunks of health, of damage from the enemy because of the AoE attacks. And there's a fair similarity between the sorcerer and the warrior, and that's that you have to wind up your attacks for too long for them to actually make sense or be proper. And that is why it was so underpowered. All of the footage that you are going to see about right now is endgame footage for the Peter Black Isle of a warrior. The problem with the warrior is that it takes ages to actually land a hit. What is the main difference between this and a sorcerer? Well, depending on the size of the enemy, depending on the size of the master, the sorcerer, that range attack that he's charging up, it's basically that. It's a range attack. It's always going to hit the mark. Especially, for example, imagine that you're fighting against a Cyclops, that you're fighting not one of the regular Cyclops, but I mean one of the Peter Black Cyclops that are giants, humongous. You do a downpour, a volley on them, and every single attack is going to hit them, which is going to translate into disgusting and filthy amounts of damage. The amounts of damage that the warrior can dish out against single target enemies, it's just nuts. But the problem is that they move too much and you have to be winding up too long. Now the thing is that he does have hyper armor, so you cannot get interrupted while you're doing like certain specific attacks. As a matter of fact, he has certain specific attacks that the more damage that you suffer, the more damage that you're going to return back to the enemy. The thing is that if you're fighting against a griffin, the griffin is going to be flying. If you you can see right here, if you're fighting against a dragon, the dragon is going to be flying. And whenever the dragon reaches the ground, you have to be in the right position. Sometimes you're not going to be able to hit that weak spot of the enemy, which is going to hinder the damage possibility that you're able to do so with the warrior. But I want to stress out, I want to make a huge emphasis that regardless of what you're seeing on screen right now, if you actually do manage to hit the weak spot of the enemy with a warrior, with a fully charged attack, it's one of the most satisfying things that you will ever see on Dragon's Dogma, at least on the 2012 Dragon's Dogma and Dark Arisen Peter Black Isle. And one of the biggest problems, one of the biggest issues as well, which is something that they fixed, we'll talk about that a little bit later, but something that they fixed is that the basic attacks that you do to enemies when you climb them, for the warrior, it's just nullified. The real damage, yes, it is a high damage from a 200 weapon, but all of the damage that you're going to translate into the final force of the hit that you're going to deal to the enemy, it's because of the skill, the vocation skills, and how long do you charge them. Those are the ones that are actually going to do something. There are different classes that have different types of attack, like for example rendering the skin of the enemy with 1,000 kisses from the daggers and so on and so forth. This guy just has the basic regular attack, so if you're going to climb against on something, it's just going to be that basic damage of the basic weapon that is not going to have that much of a force, that much of a hit, because it's not a vocation attack, which then again, most of the damage is going to come, yes, from min-maxing your character. That's not like something that's entirely going to be on Dragon's Dogma 2, but if you actually deal damage with the skill attack of your vocation, that is going to be tremendous amounts of damage. Which is where we get to the part of the video that I wanted to stress out on how much is this character buff. As you can see, our warrior right here can climb upon the enemies, and while he's climbing upon the enemies, he can charge the vocation skill while you are on top of the enemy. So that is basically it, and this is a huge deal. Now, we do not know the level of the character. This is probably a higher level monster, or probably the gear of the person that's playing in here is not optimized, but I can promise you that once you are in there, also let's have in mind that the giants, these types of enemies, they have a huge health bar. They also have huge armor. So now, translate all of that we have discussed, all of that we had on the original Dragon's Dogma from 2012 to Dragon's Dogma 2. When you're fighting against, for example, a griffin. Imagine you're fighting a griffin. The griffin takes off, but oh boy, you have your warrior on top of the griffin. And while the griffin is flying away in the distance, you are on the wings of the griffin, charging that heavy attack. And once you deal damage to that guy while he's flying, you're going to fall down to the ground, and probably the force of the hit is not going to do that much to you because you're on top of the boss, you're on top of the monster. That's what she said. But then again, that huge, humongous damage that you're going to translate, that you're going to render, that you're going to convey into the monster is going to be that much more better because of this little change that they have in here. So the real powerful classes on Dragon's Dogma 2012, it was the classes that had some kind of range, because they could be focusing on the weak spots of the enemy. Now this guy doesn't have to worry about this. It doesn't matter if you're fighting against a Chimera, which was one of the enemies that you would have the easiest time if you provided that you actually deal the hits on time, because they were moving all throughout the battlefield, but they have like 3 weak spots. Now it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if the enemy is moving around too much. It doesn't matter if he's running all around through the battlefield, because the warrior can be on top of the enemies. So that is what I wanted to share with you. I personally, even though that I love, it's like my predilect class in every single RPG that I play, at least for the first time, it's always a fighter, sword and shield, two-handed sword. That's my favorite. Dragon's Dogma, it was a little bit of an underpowered. Some people are going to argue against that, but let's remember, the real classes that had a huge advantage against everything were the classes that had distance. The Rangers, they were just filthy. The Assassins, they were filthy. The Magic Knights, they were filthy because they had their glass cannons that they can be shooting huge amounts of damage because of those things, and it doesn't matter where you are, doesn't matter the enemy is flying, doesn't matter the enemy is moving. Now all of that is balanced, and I think that the warrior is going to be one of the most powerful, one of the most OP classes in the entirety of the game, because you can translate that single force of one single enemy into so many situations, because you're always going to be on top of the enemy, charging those vocation skills. If you like the content, like and really super appreciate it. Also, you're a gorgeous and beautiful person. You're into the gorgeous and beautiful person. I'll be seeing you beautiful people in the next one. Have a lovely day, and goodbye.